from 46% to 56% of male earnings. And this shift from 56% to about 60%, as you can see, stayed relatively constant for much of the 1960s until 1980. This was largely due to a large influx of female workers in the workplace, which resulted in the stagnation of wages. But this gradually grew to start increasing or decreasing the wage gap starting in the 1980s with a lot of female pioneers in the workplace. We also thought we should cover a little bit of the legislation that has been passed so far. One of the first was the Equal Pay Act of 1963, and this was specifically aimed at abolishing the wage gap largely based on sex. And this was under the Kennedy administration, part of the New Frontier program. And it's explicitly said that no employer shall discriminate between employees on the basis of sex by paying wages at a rate less than the rate at which it pays employees of the opposite sex in such establishment for equal work on jobs. So basically the entire premise that we're aiming at right now. More recently, there's the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, and this was under the Obama administration, part of the National Equal Pay Task Force that was created in 2010. And this aims to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And basically, it overturned a Supreme Court ruling, which was Ledbetter versus Goodyear, and it changed the 180-day statute of limitations for filing an equal pay lawsuit from 180 days after the last paycheck was filed.
So, in just about every industry, not just technology, there's been an embarrassing history of wage inequality. For example, Cheryl, an engineer, lost $1 million throughout her career because of her sex. And Maxine, an educator, was told she didn't need a pay raise because her husband made it. While Cheryl and Maxine may have been hesitant to speak up, and understandably so, others have. After finding a tremendous wage gap in her industry, Elaine reached out and was rewarded for doing so. One might think that with research like Elaine's, 35 years is more than enough time for government or firms to correct the issue, but they'd be mistaken. In the most recent survey taken in 2013, hardly 2 years ago, Washington, D.C. was closest to wage equality at 91%, meaning that a woman makes 91% of the dollar of a male. But what does this really mean? What does it mean for the country, and what does it mean for us? For the country, it means that the issue of wage inequality is still a significant issue. And for us, it means that we need to make a statement. California might be the fifth closest state to wage equality in the country, but we are 26% away. We are that is nearly a quarter away from victory.
Now, many other sources that are skeptical of the wage gap often call it a myth and often want to see these other factors that could potentially explain why the wage gap exists. So this table right here is showing contribution to the wage differential between men and women of differences in measured characteristics. And this is basically taking into account education, race, labor force experience, occupation, and union status. And together, all of those factors only explain 41.1% of the wage gap. The other 60% is unexplained and largely due to unobservable factors that include economic discrimination. And the White House has also released a statement on this, saying that the wage gap cannot be fully explained when controlling for factors such as labor market experience and job characteristics. So there is still a large gap that exists because companies like ours are not fully taking into account this issue that we need to start paying our employees on an equal basis.
So this video on the Meredith Vieira show is a good example of the difference in opinions on the wage gap.
Video about gender inequality in Hollywood, DC, and in Fortune 500 companies. And I know that you took issue with what she said. Why?
Well, because I feel like it's an excuse. It's the same thing with race. You know, it's an excuse. Stop making excuses. You know, if there are opportunities, seize them and be prepared for them. and be the best if that's what it takes. If you have to be extraordinary, then be extraordinary.
But I feel like we're fighting an uphill battle when you look at just the numbers. We make 78 cents for every dollar that a man makes. But the rate we're going, and we've talked about this on the show before, my daughter who's 22 will be 65 when there's finally pay equality. There's something wrong. Something clearly wrong. I don't know that it's just, us not taking responsibility and not giving the opportunity.
Well, I feel like that I don't know if that's true. I really feel like if you
That's true. That's documented.
I know that the numbers are
Right.
but I feel like your daughter will be able to make as much money as she wants in her life, just like you are. I mean, look at you.
Right, but
success level.
I am successful. It took me a long time. It takes a lot of people a long time.
And
And for many years, I was not getting paid the same as the
Right,
guys.
and you think it's because you're a woman?
I think that had a lot to do with it. If you look at the number, there's a reason why women get 78 cents and men get $1.
I guess I won't put my fate into anything other than my own action and taking my destiny in my hands.
Well, I
will
agree
not
with
be
that.
a victim.
Yeah, no, I'm not
To
saying I'm a
anything.
victim. I'm pissed off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to be a
And
victim.
that's the thing. If
Yeah.
you want to be pissed off about it, then be pissed off about it and work harder for it. But I don't think us, complaining about it, because there is a law passed that we get paid equal pay.
Except we don't, but we don't. We don't. We don't. We don't.
So, as you can see, there are differences in opinions in the popular vote, as well as others. There are mixed feelings, and some believe that the wage gap is a myth. For example, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article called "The 77 Cents on the Dollar Myth About Women's Pay" that said that nearly all of the 23% of the gender pay gap can be attributed to factors other than discrimination, and that discrimination is unlikely to account for more than 5% of the pay gap, but it might not be present at all. There was another article from Huffington Post that said that was, the article was "The Wage Gap Myth Exposed by Feminists." And this article said that the American Association of University Women has joined with economists to find that the wage gap narrows to the point of vanishing when you take into account occupations, college majors, and length of time in the workplace. However, studying the wage gap issue shouldn't be focused on wages between different occupations or the credentials for each employee. It should be focused on the wage discrimination between people with the same job. Also, you're good. The AAUW notes that part of the 6.6-cent wage gap that they have calculated can be owed to the women's supposedly inferior negotiating skills, not unscrupulous employers. So basically they're saying that we have to argue more in order to earn the right to be paid the same as someone who has the same job as us. However, there are also some people that know that the wage gap is real. On this past Wednesday, Pope Francis said that it's pure scandal that women earn less than men for the same work. He also said Christians should become more demanding for that radical equality by supporting the right of equal pay for equal work. The Women's Institute for Research Policy article on pay equality and discrimination said that the IWPR tracks the gender wage gap according to research, and if change continues the same slow pace that it has been, it will take 81 years worldwide and 41 years in the US for women to finally reach pay equality. In Iceland, Iceland is the country with the best practice in terms of wage equality. This is according to the World Economic Forum. The score is 0.859 out of 1, and this score also is largely based on wage equality and factors such as literacy rates, labor force involvement, and gender legislators. This chart is a ranking of the biggest gender gap in earnings in countries. So as you can see that South Korea is number 1 with a pay gap of 38.9%. And then here we are number 6 at 23%. And there are others such as, where's Canada? There it is. Number 10 at 19.7%.
So now we're going to head into some U.S. companies that have done really well in trying to close the wage gap. And one of the first companies we found in our research was the Gap, the clothing company. So a consulting firm with the Workforce Diversity Initiative called Exponential Talent reports that there's hardly any significant wage gap at the Gap company. And this is because they've implemented women from the start in corporate decision making. So by putting women at the start in high power positions, they've allowed women to be on a more equal level with their male peers, because as we see in a lot of companies, women have had a harder time reaching those top levels where you do get paid more money. So by starting women in those positions, Gap has narrowed that, pardon the pun, gap. And some other U.S. companies that have done a really good job with this is the Salesforce company and Reddit. And Salesforce is actually kind of surprising because they are a male-dominated company with 71% of the company being made up of men. And they acknowledge the fact that they clearly have a wage indiscrepancy between what they pay men and what they pay women. So the CEO has now declared that they're starting a women's search program to help try and close this gap and bring more women into the company and more women in high-powered positions at this company. Also, the interim Reddit CEO is working on eliminating the wage gap by eliminating negotiations for salaries. Now, this is an interesting one. I didn't know how I felt about it at first, but I think what this does is, since it's shown women are less likely to ask for a raise or say, I need more money for my job, it's making the playing field more equal. And she's also posting the salaries online to hold the company accountable for, this is what we said we're paying that position, so this is what this position will be paid for whoever gets it.
Another notable and recent example is Gravity Payments. Dan Price, the CEO of Gravity Payments, announced to his employees that they all, along with themselves, will receive the equal salary of $70,000.
So our proposal for change is that we will keep the names of the applicants anonymous and the genders as well while hiring them, and we will base our hiring process, our hiring, off of strictly qualifications. We will also eliminate pay negotiations and set standard salaries for each position, and we will make salaries public information as just noted by Alan. Also, every position will have equal salaries for equal hours regardless of gender.
This proposal won't only affect the women at the company. Obviously, it'll have an effect on the men at the company. It will affect the families of the women at the company, as well as finally, it'll have an effect on the local business, on the surrounding business of our company.
So up here we have some of the risks and challenges that we think our company will pose with implementing these policies. And as you can see, we've come up with some questions that are really important to have them addressed. But we decided we're going to answer each of these questions the same way. Yes, in the short term, it's going to require a lot of hard work. It might take time, and it might take sacrifice at points by putting more money to paying equal pay. But anything that's worth achieving takes hard work, takes sacrifice. And so in the long term, all of this will be worth it, because that's how we'll become a great equal company that stands for social change and social justice.
Again, this quote from the White House is just summarizing why pay equality across any company, across any sort of professional area, is the most economically responsible thing to do. It says closing the pay gap is the right thing to do, but it is also an economic necessity. Closing the gap could have broad benefits for reducing poverty, growing the middle class, and boosting our nation's economic growth. Basically, as our company stands, we are not only obligated to our employees, but also to the nation as a whole to do this, because it involves instituting social change that will provide an example for other companies to follow.
So to end this, we wanted to start with this speech, that we're in the year 2015, but the fact that women make 78 cents to every dollar a man makes me think we're in the 1950s, but we're 65 years ago. And as a technology company, we are supposed to be forging the way with new policies, and by having this new policy for wage equality, we will be forging the way in other ways than just technology. So it's time to step out of the 1950s.
And in Silicon Valley Inc., wage inequality has really been a large issue since our founding. The vast majority of the company believes that equality shouldn't be earned, it should be given. If we pay our female employees equal wages, performance will increase, our brand value, our brand image will both increase, turnover will decrease, and we'll make a statement for other tech companies and other companies in general to follow. And like I just said, as a nationally influencing firm, we can set an example for the rest of the country.
So we are proposing a policy for change. We have the responsibility to set the standard for equality. Our proposal states, once again, that Silicon Valley Incorporated will keep the name and gender of applicants anonymous in the hiring process, eliminate wage discrepancies between men and women that have the same job, make salaries public information online, and enforce equal salaries regardless of gender.
According to the World Economic Forum, it is going to take 81 years worldwide for the gender pay gap to be closed, continuing at this current pace. But the reality is that this company is not willing to wait another 81 years for that to happen. By implementing this proposal now, we are setting a standard both for ourselves and for other companies to follow in our footsteps and to create this culture of pay equality that will change everything for our company. Because when women succeed, America succeeds. So we now are open for any questions.
I have a question about the interview process. If you're going to keep everything anonymous applications, how are you going to interview with them? And
I get what you're saying. Interesting. We chose this as part of the proposal. Oxford actually, this is how their process works. When you send in your application, it's no name, it's only what your credentials and what you've done. And then once, the other issue was like a background test. Background check. And once we review your application, and if you meet the requirements for the job, or if we believe that you would be good for the job, then we'll ask for the name. But at that point, the gender doesn't matter. We know that we can hire you, just have to pass the background check.
I have a question. So what, you said you're going to pay people for a position all the same amount. How about if you have a superstar that is awesome at their job and they come to you, whether male or female, and they're going to leave the firm, they'd like to stay, but they've been offered a lot more somewhere else. So are you considering any pay based on performance versus just on gender?
Well, I think going into this, there is obviously the risk that we're going to lose top talent if they get offered something else in another company, and I think that's inevitable. But I think also that instituting this policy, while we might lose some people in the process, having this be a really public announcement and having it be part of our public reputation is going to also attract a lot of other top talent that really is attracted to this concept of equality. So maybe in the short term we might lose a couple people, but I think in the long term, the people who really are on board with this idea are going to be willing to stick with it.
Okay. Some groups you've grilled with hundreds of questions. We didn't put more in there.
Well, people are crazy.
did you find any research on other factors like race, things like that, and not just gender?
Yeah, it was very interesting actually that Asian American women actually make 90% of white male earnings, and I think it's
Hispanic women make 60.
yeah, and then African American women I think was either 54 or 64%. So obviously race does play a really big role in that, and that's also something that we're really trying to counteract with this.
And Cheryl, that first woman in one of those early slides, if you read her quote, it was she lost $1 million throughout her career because of her sex, but also because of her race.
How are you going to go about wage equality with people who are established in the company? Would you lower anyone's pay or raise it?
I think it would depend on the situation, depend on how long they were working there. We would probably have to implement the same wage for new employees, because I don't think that it would be necessarily fair to lower
Yeah,
salaries.
our goal is not to lower wages. Basically, we want to raise female wages so that they are equal with current male wages. And while that might take away from our profits in the short term, like I said, eventually in the long term, we're gonna get more top talent and more of public recognition that's gonna make up for that financial discrepancy.
Are people stuck at one salary for their whole career, or is there some sort of structure where everyone would get a bonus at the same time, or after a certain number of years everyone gets a bonus? Like, how does it work for bonuses or promotions, or are they just done in general?
We would hope that we would have a Christmas bonus to give out to people. I think it's nice to reward. For example, I think it's Hershey's. They've been using the Hershey company has been using the same Christmas commercial for the past 10 years, I believe, and they give the money that they would have spent in advertising to their employees as a bonus. So I would hope that for like holidays and things, there would be bonuses, of course, and as you move up in rank, your position would change, and therefore your salary would change as well.
Do you think that like companies would like make new like titles and stuff to like kind of get around the system?
That's a good question, but our purpose really isn't to change, anybody's title, because it's not about what you're called. We're really just focusing on like the pay discrepancies that people are facing. So whether or not someone has a title for their job, it's really just going to be based on having two people who do the same job. If they have the same job and they work the same hours, they're going to get paid the same amount of money. So.
Did you have another question?
Oh no, I'm very fast.
We're ready for